Hi there, I'm Paul with another session on PowerApps, and today I am coming to you from Datacom's offices in Christchurch, New Zealand, where I'm happy to say I'm now working on the PowerApps team. Okay, so on with the video. This is part 5 of the series I've been doing on using cognitive services with PowerApps. So let's just have a very quick recap. So in part 1, I demonstrated a number of different scenarios that we could use with cognitive services, and we are now on to celebrities from a gallery. So let's remind you what that looked like. So here's my list of celebrities, and what happens is I select one of these images. So these images are stored on a SharePoint document library. I'm clicking in to view an image, and at the same time the image is being sent to cognitive services for analysis, and any celebrities in the image are being identified. The name, a percentage for how sure cognitive services is that this is the person, and then we've got a little face rectangle to point out where the person is in the photo. So let's try some other ones just to show this working. So there we go. These are mainly the cast of Game of Thrones. Now, I've done a little update since the original video that I showed you. So if I just jump into one of the photos with multiple people, we'll see now the system actually highlights multiple faces. And to see who is behind each face or who is the owner of each face, we just have to click within the relevant rectangle, and then we'll see who the person is. Works for one person, obviously, works for two, and here is the cast of Ocean's 11. So lots of celebrities in this photo, and here we go, boom. So lots of little rectangles, and as we click on each one, if you have a look here underneath the picture, just below the picture, you'll see the different names of those people showing up. Okay, so I'm going to show you how I built this. I'm going to go through the whole thing from the very beginning, but where we have covered things in earlier sessions, I'll just allude to those earlier sessions, tell you where to go to find the additional detail. But we're going to build it from scratch. So here is my blank canvas to start working with. I'm going to do it in tablet layout, just so I've got a little bit more space to work with. I'm going to put the gallery and the image side by side, just so we don't have to keep flicking between screens. It's just going to be a little bit easier for demonstration purposes. So here we go then. I'm going to start off by inserting a gallery. So this is going to be the gallery which is holding my list of celebrities. So I've got a gallery here. That's great. Oh, and I'm obviously going to have to add in a data source. So let's do that. I'm going to add a data source. Here we go. I want to add things in from SharePoint. Here we go. So that's the one I was using recently. Okay, now my images are in a document library, and when we choose a data source from SharePoint, we only see lists, but libraries do work. Document libraries do work. So what I can do, you can see this additional entry at the bottom here, enter custom list name. I'm going to enter the name of my library, which is Sandbox. And I can now put a little tick against it, and I can click on connect. So that's connecting to my library, which I just called Sandbox, which has got all my images in that I'm playing around with. So if you want to add a document library, you've just got to type the name of the document library in here. Okay, so that's going to go and add my Sandbox data. That's great. So now for my gallery, I'm going to say that the items property is going to be Sandbox. So that's great. And the image, I'm going to want that to be linked to this item dot, and then we're going to want to use link. So that's going to give me a link through to the image. That's great. So we should start to see images appearing now. We've got the date that the image was modified and the title of the image. None of the images have got titles, so I'm just going to change that to file name with extension. And a lot of these we'll see in a moment are things that I have just copied from IMDb. So they've got whatever long code file name that they were given by the IMDb staff when they were being added. Okay, so here we are then. So now I've got my list of images, but I've got all kinds of files in here because all I have done is connected to the document library. I haven't put any sort of filter on here. So this is an interesting one. Let's have a little look at what we can do by way of filtering. So I'm just going to have to open up my SharePoint document library, and remember we can do that by going to our data sources and clicking and choosing edit data. So I'm just waiting while that appears. And there it is. Okay, so I've got the same files in here. These are the files that you could see in the gallery in the application. Now, something that I touched on briefly in the first video was this MediaServiceAutoTags column. So this is a standard column in SharePoint Online. It may depend on whether you're on the early release ring, whether you have this or not, but have a little check to see whether you have. All you need to do is to go into the view settings. Okay, and you may have these MediaService auto tags and the MediaService OCR column. So I spoke about those briefly at the end of video 1, but to just recap very quickly, the MediaService auto tags, whenever you drop an image or upload an image into your document library, then SharePoint Online will analyze that image and it will put it in a category. As you can see here, we've got text document receipt, indoor, person outdoor, person indoor, and so on. Okay, so we're going to use that now because the only images which are going to have celebrities in them are going to be ones which start with the word person in this column here. So let's jump back to our app with the gallery. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a filter on this sandbox library. I'm going to say filter this where, and we're going to use a starts with MediaServiceAutoTag, and we're going to want to put in person. Now do be careful to make sure that you put person all in lowercase if you're following along. There we go, because it is case sensitive. So now we can see a little bit of activity going on, and hey presto, we've now only got images which have got people in them. So the image of the hot dog and the various files that I've been messing around with in my sandbox library, they're no longer visible to us. It's only where we've got faces visible. So that's looking pretty good so far. Let's just shuffle this. Oopsie daisy. Grab it from the right place. There we are. Shuffle this gallery, move it over to the side. So we've got plenty of space over here on the right for what comes next, for where we're going to be identifying our celebrities. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to insert an image control. Here we are. We'll have that take up about half the space. So we've got a little bit of room underneath it for the name of the person that we click on, and maybe we'll add a little data table at the bottom as well that gives the names of everybody that we're interested in. Okay, so now what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to set the image property here to our gallery, the selected item, and the link for the selected item. There we go. Right, let's quickly change it from that one. There we are. That's a much more pleasant image. I was just experimenting with all sorts of different images, not just movie celebrities, but people from the news, whether they be famous or infamous, you decide. Okay, so moving swiftly on from that, we've now got our images appearing here on the right hand side. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to change the image position property to, let me remind myself, oops, I'm on the wrong one, excuse me, this image. And I want to change the image position property to stretch. Okay, so that it takes the full size of this image box. Now it's just going to make it a little bit easier to position the rectangle over the face of the celebrity when we get to that step. Okay, so when we click, we will see in the image a bigger image of the person or of the celebrities. And what we're going to do as well is we're going to say, okay, when we click, what we also want to do is we want to send this image off to cognitive services so we can analyze it and then pull back the information about who is in that image and where their face appears. So I am going to specify that I want to have a flow. So I'm going to say when I click this button, start a flow. Now I've got a whole load of flows in here where I've been experimenting and messing around with things. So I'm just going to add a brand new one so that we can do the whole process from scratch. So we've seen in other videos as well, we've been pulling in images from the add picture control and also from the camera. This application would absolutely work with an image that you get from the camera control, but unfortunately I don't have any celebrities available to me for demonstration purposes. So we're going to use a gallery, but that's handy because it also shows you how we can use galleries as well. Right, 1 second, because this has come up in the wrong tenant. Okay, that's better. So I've had to come into Flow on my own tenant. Sometimes the browsers end up taking you to a different tenant if you keep signing in with different login IDs. So I'm going to have to build my flow from here. Normally when we come in from PowerApps, it will start a new flow for us and it will add in the PowerApps initial step, but I'll do that manually. So I want this flow to be triggered by PowerApps. And what I want to do is when the flow begins, I want to go to SharePoint and get the particular image that needs to be sent off to cognitive services. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to use the action which is the SharePoint get file content. So have I gone past it? Yeah, here we are, get file content. Fantastic, and then I'm going to select my site that I want to get the content from. There we go. And the file identifier. Okay, so I'm going to ask for that in PowerApps. So I'm going to have it so that when we click the button in PowerApps, we're going to say run this flow, and we're going to pass to this flow the identifier of the file that we want analyzed. So that's great. Now I can bring in my cognitive services action. This is the computer vision action, and in video 2 I showed you how you can sign up for free to the cognitive services APIs, including the computer vision API. So we want to use Computer Vision API, and the one that we're going to use is recognize domain-specific content. So we're going to have a click on that. And now it's asking us what domain model do we want to use. So this is very interesting. We can say analyze our image for celebrities or analyze our image for landmarks. So these are two domain models that Microsoft have set up and have trained with something like, I think they say 200,000 celebrities and landmarks already in there. Now, obviously, in the real world, if you're building your own solution, you probably don't want to limit yourself just to celebrities and landmarks. So you can create your own domain models. You can teach cognitive services to recognize, for example, your members of staff or tools or products or whatever it happens to be that you want it to learn to recognize. So we're just going to use this built-in one for celebrities for now. So maybe in a future session, we'll have a look at building our own domain models. Okay, so now we have to say image source. So there's an option here. We can either say we're going to pass through image content, or we're going to pass a URL that points to an image. So we're actually giving it image content. And where's our image content coming from? Well, it's going to come from our get file content step. So there we are, get file content. So now we've got our file content, we are going to have to create a step which is going to send that content back to PowerApps. Now, if we use the PowerApps response step, we can only pass back things like strings, yes, no values, files, and so on. What we want to do is we want to pass back, we're going to be passing back tabular information, a table of data. And for that, we're going to need to use the response step. So the HTTP response step. So let's show you what that looks like. Here's the HTTP response step. And with that, you have to fill in an item for the body, what you're going to pass back. So we could pass back body, which would be everything which has come out of this step above, the cognitive services analysis step, or we might want to just return the celebrities, or just return the landmarks, or the result. So we're only going to be interested in returning the celebrities. But what we need to do is we need to define a JSON schema. We need to explain to Flow what this celebrities table is going to look like. So we need to define that in here. Now, I'm not very good at writing JSON, and I'm very lazy. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a little trick so that we can generate this schema automatically. So what I'm going to have to do that trick is I'm first of all just going to have to delete this step out because I can't complete it yet. I've got to put the schema in. And instead, I'm going to put in a new step, which is going to be a compose step. And the compose step is going to allow me to have a look at the data that comes out of that celebrities table. So it's going to be this one here, celebrities. And then it's going to let me use that in order to build the JSON schema. So let's have a little go with this then. I'm going to have to give this a title. So I want to be able to find this one easily. So I'm going to call it AAA celebs, just for ease of finding it and ease of using it. Obviously, in your own solutions, do make sure you name things sensibly so that you can find them again. It's very good to have a naming convention so you know where to look for things. Okay, so back into our application here. This is now showing up, this AAA celebs. So I'm going to click on AAA celebs to add this into my solution. And it takes a little while it's adding. So while it's adding, it is also bringing in some metadata about this flow as well, like, for example, the parameters, the arguments that it asks for. Okay, so we're going to give it the identifier. I think that's going to have to be this item dot identifier. We might be able to get away without the this item, but it's not bad practice to remember to pop it in. And we've got a little error showing on there. What's that all about? Expected, some closed parentheses. Oh yes, I've got my quote and my brackets the wrong way around. There we go. Oops. Try that one more time. There we are. Fantastic. Always much better just to select it from the list to avoid the typos. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to run my app and I'm going to click on this image here, and you'll see some activity going on because not only are we putting the image into the image control, but also we're sending that information off to Flow. So I'm going to go back into Flow now. I'm going to go up to the data about the flow where I can see the run history. I'm now going to go into the run history, and that's going to give me a slightly different view, and it's going to show me what happened for this particular run. So here we can see we got some information from PowerApps. We got a file identifier, and this is the file identifier that we got. Okay, and what we want to do is we want to come down to our compose step, and we want to have a look at the output of our compose step. So remember, this output is the celebrities list, and we can see here an example. So this is what the data looks like when it comes back from cognitive services. We've got a heading in here, name, which is the name of the celebrity, a confidence rating, which is a value up to 1 for how certain we are that this is the given celebrity. And we've also got here a record called face rectangle, which includes 4 parameters: top, left, width and height, which is going to be for placing this rectangle around the face of the celebrity. Okay, so the important thing that I needed here was to be able to look at the output in this compose step. So the output of that celebrities table. So I'm just going to highlight that and copy it. I'm going to go back into the edit mode. I'm going to add in my response step. Here we go. And while we're doing this, there we are, response request. I will just say that this is very useful to learn how to get this complex data from Flow back into PowerApps, or just working with complex data within Flow. So in my new role, I have already had to do this many times. So it's not just for cognitive services. This is a useful technique to know and to understand. Okay, so I want to return the celebrities information, so I've selected that. And what I'm going to do is use this option here, use sample payload to generate schema. So it's going to write the schema for me from my example. So my example here is Sean Bean. So we've got the table here for that celebrity. And when I hit done, what's going to happen is the JSON schema is going to be automatically created for me. So it's saying it's of type array, and it contains some objects. And there's an object in there with a property of face rectangle, and that has sub-properties of top, left, width, and height, and so on and so on. So this JSON schema stuff is not something that you'd want to write by hand, but fortunately, Flow will actually write it for you when you give it an example. That's great. So I'm going to save this now, and I'm going to go back into my Power App. Now, if I were to try to run the flow again, I would actually get an error because my flow definition has changed since the time when I originally added it to my application. So what I need to do is to remove it and re-add it again. Remember, every time you add your flow, it picks up the arguments, which are both the input arguments and the output arguments. So our output arguments have now changed. So let's remove the flow from here and then pop it back in again. So I'm going to go to view and my data sources, and then I'm going to remove my flow. There we go. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add it back in again. So let's just scroll to the top here, click on here. I'll just, that's all right, we'll write it again. Sometimes it's nice to copy paste, but for the examples, this is how we're going to do it. So I'm going to go to flows again. Here's my flow at the bottom. I'm going to click and it's going to add it in again. And this time when it adds it in, it's also going to say, right, yeah, you're going to return information with the celebrity's name and with the confidence level and with the rectangle and so on. So here we go. I'm going to pass through .link again. So that's fine, but what I want to do is I want to collect the information that is coming back, that is being returned by that response step. So I'm going to say I want to collect this into a collection which I'm going to call call for collection and celeb. What do I want to put in it? I want to put in it whatever is returned from that response step. There we go, and so that will go into call celeb. Now, obviously I haven't clicked the button yet to actually send any data to Flow, but let's just have a look in our collections list. And what you'll see there is I've got call celeb, and call celeb has got these columns for confidence, face, rectangle, and name in it. So I haven't run the flow yet, but when I added the flow just a second ago to PowerApps, PowerApps asked Flow, okay, what parameters am I going to have to send you and what details are you going to send back to me? So if you ever change either the information that you're going to send to Flow or the information that's going to come back, you're going to have to remove that flow from your application and then add it in again, because it's only when you're adding the flow in that it will give you that it will bring in those parameters. Unfortunately, there's no refresh option for a flow. Wish there was, but there isn't. Okay, so let's carry on a little bit, and okay, let's we'll select this one again. So we're now sending off the information to Flow, and Flow will be sending back the information that it got from Cognitive Services. So let's again have a look at our collection, and we will now see, or should see, that call celeb is populated. Okay, that didn't quite work. Let's have a quick check why. So you can see here we've got a little red thing here. So it wasn't happy. I'll tell you what that will be. Okay. Oh, I'm wrong. The flow is on. Let me see why it failed and where it failed. Get file content. Okay, I suspect that is something to do with the identifier. Let's just give that a try. So do you remember the first time I did this, I didn't just say link, I said this item.link. Let's try that one more time. Okay, and I'm still getting an error. Let me investigate and get back to. Okay, there we are. I'm sure you'd all spotted the mistake that I'd made. I've put in link. What I really meant was the identifier. So let's put that in. Because it's no good sending the link through to our flow. Our flow expects the identifier. Okay, so that should be a little bit better. So let's hit the button again. And let's see what has been returned to our collection. Yay, there we are, fantastic. So we've got the celebrity name, we've got the degree of confidence, and we've got a record which represents the face rectangle. So when we click into that, we can see those dimensions. Okay, so that's the information which is being returned to us. So that's great. So what we want to do now then is we can insert a data table, and we can set that to our col celeb, and we can say that we would like to see the name and the confidence. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop the rectangle on here as well for a moment, because what we'll do is we will first of all show you how to build this so that clicking on somebody's name in the data table selects them in the picture, and then later we'll show you the other way of doing it so that in the picture every face gets a rectangle around it, and then you click on that to view the name of the person. So we'll do it both ways around. Okay, so here we are then. Now we're pulling back the details that we're after, and what we're going to do is we're going to say for the selected one, draw a rectangle around the face. Now obviously what I can do here is I can rearrange this a little bit so that I don't actually have to see the face rectangle part. So we can hide that away. And I guess while we're here, actually, the other thing that we will do is we will turn this confidence into a nice percentage score. So let's have a little go at doing that. I think first of all, I'm going to see if I can make the text a little bit bigger so it's easier to see. And then let's show you how we can turn this into a percentage score. That's a nice little technique as well. So in my items property for my data table, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the command add columns, and I'm going to say I want to add a column, and I'm going to call this column conf% for confidence percentage. And what this column is going to be, it's going to be the confidence score multiplied by 100, but we don't want lots of decimal places, so we're also going to round that. So the confidence score multiplied by 100, rounded to, let's just have one decimal place in there, and we'll see how that looks. So now I'm going to come back to my data table. I'm going to choose my fields, and now I've got a new field here, conf%, and let's just see how that looks. Much better. So conf 100. So now we can remove the other confidence field. So we'll get rid of that one and we'll just use conf%. And in fact, we might want to put a little percentage sign on the end of that. So I can just concatenate a % there. And we should find here, we've now got 100% showing. So fantastic. So we can now see who the celebrity is. We just need to put a little rectangle around their face. So let's jump in and do that quickly now. So I'm just going to insert on the screen a rectangle somewhere down near the bottom. Here it is. So I'll move that over here. Now obviously what we want to do is we want to make sure that the fill of the rectangle is transparent. There we are. And we want to make sure that the borders are nice and obvious. So let's make a fairly thick border. We'll make it the dashed style, and we'll try and make it a color which is going to stand out in most situations. So we'll make it a nice bright red color. So there we are. So we've got that. So now we can start pulling out the coordinates for the rectangle. So remember, those are in our rectangle record in our collection. So we need to navigate our way into this face rectangle and start pulling out these various bits of information. So let's first of all show you how to do that in a text box so that we've got something a bit visual going on. I'll put that there and I will boost the size of that a bit. There we go. So what I can do in here is in the text property, just to demonstrate pulling the information out of that record, I'm going to say data table 1 dot selected dot, and we've got face rectangle. Now remember, face rectangle is a record. There are multiple things within it. One of the things within it is left. So there we are. I can now see the left value from the face rectangle. I would be able to see the right value. Let's try that again. Sorry, there's no right, it's width. So we've got left, top, width, and height. So there we are. So I'm going to need to use these to set the values of this rectangle. So here we are. So I'm going to set the X of the rectangle. So that's the left of the rectangle. And I am going to set that to be data table 1 dot selected dot face rectangle dot left. There we are. Oh, but it's not in quite the right place, is it? Well, there's an obvious reason for that. The 266 for the left is being measured from the edge of the screen rather than the edge of the image. So what we need to do here is we just need to say plus image1 dot x to get the x coordinate of the image. Oh, sorry, it's not image1, it's image2. Image1 is the one inside the gallery, so image2. There we are. So now we've got something which is in roughly the right position. So let's put in a few other ones as well. So there we've got our X. Then we can clearly put in our Y. And that is going to be based on our top property. So there we are. Now that hasn't come out in quite the right place. So let's have a little look at that. So the image is at the top of the screen anyway. So I'll leave that in just in case we ever move the image around. So the issue here is that our picture has changed dimensions. Remember, we did a fit to make sure it would fit in this image control here. So there's a couple of little tricks that we need to use now. The first one is one that I often forget, and it is absolutely critical. Calculate original dimensions. I'm going to set that to true. Okay, and once I set that to true, I can start making use of some other properties, which are the original width, the image's original width, and the image's original height. Oops. Why can't I find? Okay, so they don't show up in here because they're just properties, but let's just show you something here. If I go now to image 2 dot, here we are, original width. I can see what the original width of the picture was, 692. What's the width of it now? The width is 666. And similarly with the height, which I think is going to be the one that is more noticeable here. So the height of this image is 494, but the original image was 1000. So we've got to take that into account when we're positioning our rectangle. So let's show you how we do that. What we need to do here now is we need to multiply So it's going to be this part. We're going to need to multiply this by image2.width over image2.original width. Aha, spot the deliberate mistake there. We're doing the top, which is all to do with heights. So let's make that all to do with heights. Oopsie, I've done it again. Original height. There we are. So now we're starting to see the box appear in the right place. So let's put the same fix in for the width. So here I'm just doing the same thing but changing height to width and original width. And you should see while I'm doing this that rectangle is getting closer and closer to where it should be on the screen, so that's great. And again, remember we've got to set the height and the width of the rectangle as well. So let's do that. Let's do the width next. So here's our width. We don't want it fixed as 150. We want to take the width property from the face rectangle returned by Cognitive Services. And we shouldn't be adding on this time the X coordinate of the image. There we are. So that's the right width on the face. And now let's go for the height. So I'm just going to go for the height property of the rectangle. Height. And the height. And the height. There we go. Okay, so now we've got the rectangle exactly around the face. So let's see how that works for some of the other images that we've got. Okay, so off goes the image to Cognitive Services. Cognitive Services comes back and says it's Amelia Clark, 100%, and we show the rectangle again. So obviously things you could do here are to hide the rectangle while the details are being calculated, but let's not worry too much about that for the moment. So there we are, and now because Julian Glover is the one selected, his is the face with the rectangle, and we can click on Isla Blair. And again, let's show you the example with the Ocean's 11 cast. There we go. So now as we click on the different names down here, we can see that the rectangle is jumping over the appropriate face. So fantastic, we're almost there. What I was going to show you though was one additional neat little trick, which was getting all of these faces with a rectangle around them and then having it so that you can click on the name and the rectangle will appear. So what we will do is I will just duplicate this screen and I'll give you the example that works with the multiple faces being highlighted. I really must delete that picture. There we go. Get it onto something more pleasant. Better. Okay, so what we're going to do this time then is we are going to modify things a little bit. So I still want that rectangle, but what I'm going to do, this is quite sneaky, I am going to insert a gallery. Now, this has to be a normal gallery, not a flexible height gallery. So I'm going to put in a gallery and I'm going to set the data source to be colceleb. I'm going to move the gallery so that it's over the picture. I'm going to select the rectangle. I'm actually going to cut it, and then I'm going to place it inside the gallery. Oops. Of course, sometimes that's easier said than done. There we go. Good. So now my rectangle is inside the gallery. I've got to change things a little bit on my rectangle now. I am going to have to come down to my X. Oh, and it lost all of its settings. How frustrating is that? Okay, kept some of them. Right, so the rectangle is going to be relative to the gallery. So I no longer need to put in a factor here. I can remove that. And I'm no longer interested in saying this table dot selected. What I want to do instead is say this item. So I've got a gallery. The source for my gallery is the list of celebrities. So I will have multiple lines, potentially, one for each celebrity, or multiple entries in that gallery. So I'm just setting these up here. So let's do the top. We've done that. Let's now do the width. Oh, sorry, we'll do the X next. So let's do, sorry, left and width and the original width. There we go. And we'll do the height as well. So that we just have to change to this item, and the width. Again, we're just going to say this item. There we go. Fantastic. So now we've got the image around Amelia Clark's face. So let's now move on to the one where there were multiple people. So let's start with the one with 2 people. And off we go. Now, we're missing a little bit. Why are we missing? The first one is fine, but the second one isn't. Okay, that's because the rectangle is being positioned relative to the template in which the rectangle appears. So let's select our gallery, and then let's see if we can select, there we are, the template in the gallery. Now watch what happens as I make this template nice and small. Boom, we're in the right place. Wow, isn't that good? Right, something that we want to just fix as well on this gallery is going to be any template padding. We want to make sure there's no padding between the templates, because that will also cause things to be a little bit off center. So we can see there's template padding. There's a gap of 5 pixels or 5 whatevers between each template. So if I set that to 0, we should see that position itself. There we are, a little bit more squarely over the face of the celebrity. So let's give it the real challenge now. Let's go into the one with the cast of Ocean's 11. We'll let it go off, and boom, there we are. So now we've got all of those faces there showing. That's fantastic. So what if we want to know who is who? Let's sort that out for you. Let's give ourselves a little bit of space here. I'm going to move this data table down a little bit. I'm going to get myself a label, which I'm going to pop on here, and I'm going to make it nice and big, and we'll make the text a little bit bigger so that you can see it more easily at home. There we are. So what do you think the formula for this needs to be? Okay, let's show you. All this has to be is my gallery, which has got my rectangles in, which is gallery 2 dot selected dot name. Boom, look at that. Wow, clever stuff. So that's a really neat trick, being able to use a gallery to effectively create as many controls as you need on the fly. So we're creating however many rectangles we need and positioning them wherever we want within that gallery. So let's just do a couple of other little bits of tidying up here. So what I'm going to do for the rectangle is I am now going to set its color. So that's its border color. And I am going to say, if this item dot is selected, then make it green. Otherwise, make it red. There we are. Let's have a look now. So whichever one we click on is the selected one. It turns green and we get the celebrity's name there. And of course, we could always just put in the degree of confidence that we've got as well. So again, I think what we probably want to do is we would want to round gallery 2 dot selected dot confidence. We're going to, in fact, we want to multiply it, don't we, first? We want to round that, yes, multiply that by 100, round it to 1 decimal place. There we are. So 99.9% sure it's George Clooney, and we could concatenate on the end of that a percentage symbol. If I get my brackets in the right place. There we go. So that's how we build the celebrity spotting application. And as I said when we were going through the bit-in flow where we were choosing the domain model, this is an example. You can see here how if you were to train cognitive services on particular people in your organization or particular tools or whatever, then you could use it quite easily to select those in any images that you've got as well. Okay, well, I hope you've enjoyed that. I think this really starts to show some of the power and capabilities of PowerApps. So go and experiment, see what you can build. Submit to my channel. That encourages me to keep creating more of these videos. And please do leave a comment if you enjoyed this or if you didn't enjoy it, if there's some way I could make it better, or if there are other things that you would like me to cover, let me know and I shall try to do that. Okay, thanks very much and happy power apping.